You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. Is aging really about time or more about our own energetic coherence? Find out more in this episode. This episode contains adult subject matter and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. Bones moving into alignment in seconds without force or manipulation? Bunions straightening out in minutes? These things sound impossible until we see them happen, and then we have to reconsider what we thought we knew about healing. Richard Gordon is the author and founder of Quantum Touch. With over 45 years in the field of holistic health, he is considered a pioneer and visionary in the field of energy healing. His 5 best-selling books are in 17 languages, with certified practitioners of his methods in over 10 countries and over 150 certified instructors worldwide. Richard has spoken and taught at medical centers, chiropractic colleges, conferences, and universities. Dr. Norman Shealy, founding president of the American Holistic Medical Association, endorsed Quantum Touch after testing it on his most difficult chronic pain patients. He called it the first technique that may truly allow us all to become healers. In recent years, Richard has developed Self-Created Health, a potent system for people to rapidly discover and heal the emotional causes of health problems. And quite unexpectedly, he discovered an empirical and robust method to scientifically explore the intersection of matter and consciousness. The implications of this have the potential to shift many of the world's most fundamental and limiting beliefs. Here is my interview with Richard Gordon. Hi, Richard. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you, and we'll be talking about partly reversing aging, which is also a super interesting part and topic to talk about. So thank you for being here today and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. And would you like to start us off with maybe a little bit about yourself and the pieces of your story and your journey that connect to where you're at today, and then maybe share with our listeners a little bit about what you do today so they can get to know you a bit?
Okay. First off, I've been interested in actually teaching energy healing for 50 years. And the journey's it's a long story. But to make it short, I learned something called polarity therapy. I wrote a book called Your Healing Hands. It's in 10 languages. And just before the book came out, I saw it take me from feeling my worst to my best in an hour. And that was phenomenal. But my jaw dropped when I met my teacher, Bob Rasmussen. And my girlfriend invited me to this seminar. And this grandpa, who is large and blasé, was telling tall tales, and I didn't believe a word he said. He said, there was a time a woman had a tumor the size of a grapefruit and it melted in an hour. And there was a time the child had a broken bone sticking out of the flesh, and an hour and a half later he could walk again. And then there was the time, I just touched people and the bones move into alignment. I thought this guy was completely full of it. But my girlfriend volunteered, and she stood in front of the room, and we're all looking at a major S curve in her spine. She had a massive scoliosis. One of her hips was like this, and shoulder was like that. And Bob said, I just touched the hips, and it just rolled back under his hand in 2 seconds. I went, what? And then he touched the occipital ridge, and it rolled back to alignment. And he went up and down her spine for 7 or 8 minutes, and it I'd say about 50-60% of the scoliosis straightened out in this little demonstration. And I assumed he had a rare gift that no one else was ever going to learn it, and certainly not me. But in the course of an hour, I was actually able to move occipital bones. Blew my mind. I apprenticed with him, took over in his retirement, and then radically evolved his system. The idea of the work is really simple. I should get into that before I do more storytelling. The idea is that the healer is the one who was sick and got well. The practitioner is the one who holds the coherent energy to allow the person to do their own self-healing. All healing is self-healing. A healer is someone who is sick and got well, and a great healer was very sick and got well quickly. You do not heal other people. We don't put badges on ourselves and call ourselves masters or anything like silly like that. What we do is we learn techniques that are very simple, like progressive relaxation, but we link it to breathing techniques where we're moving waves of energy through our body with coherence. And as a physician, Jerry Pittman, put it, in its elegance, quantum touch first provides healing for the practitioner. So what happens is you hold a high vibration, you learn how to hold high vibration, then the person you're working on matches your vibration. And their self-healing mechanisms go into work to accelerate their own healing process. So it takes the ego out of it. No one calls themselves a healer. We don't have any badges. We don't have any levels. There's levels of the work, but it's not levels like you've mastered this or you're attained the third degree or something. But essentially, we're seeing a wide range of phenomenon that are not understood or recorded by mainstream scientists or doctors because materialist science only wants to believe in things that they can measure or weigh. If they can't measure it, they call it irrelevant and unnecessary. The idea is that we're accessing this prana, and you can look back to the Vedic tradition 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, where the ancients understood this. But in our noisy culture, we don't acknowledge that this energy of coherence exists in the system that can stimulate and amplify healing. I'm doing a little myself. I got a little too upset about some things and developed this upper respiratory thing, but I know what's going on. It's just part of the process. So this ties into another modality that I created called self-created health that helps people find the emotional cause. And when you release the emotions, not only do symptoms go away, but you're grateful for having had the condition because it shows you how you would stop loving. Anyway, that's part of the quantum touch courses. We've got, I think, like 8 major courses now in the series. So I continued to experiment with this. And then I found out that essentially, I'm jumping around in my head. It goes like this. We hold the field of energy, and you can work on organ systems, glands, pain, whatever it is. The body knows how to heal itself. I don't know how to heal a cut. The smartest person in the world wouldn't know how to heal a paper cut. And yet we think we're smart enough to intervene. So I went along happily using quantum touch. We sandwich the pain. We follow the pain where it goes from place to place through the body. One of my practitioners told me recently how she completely caused, I don't know if she caused it, but she held the field and a bunion completely straightened out in 10 minutes. Now that was very unfortunate because rapid healing is often emotionally unacceptable to a person. And the woman kept saying, I can't believe it, I can't believe it, I can't believe it. And she just insisted that it go away, and it did. But had the session taken 8 weeks, and she says, you know what, I think that's looking better. Wow, that's really exciting. I think you made some improvement. And then over 10 or 12 weeks, she's, oh my God, it's fully corrected now because she didn't have the emotional time to integrate the thing. So for years and years, I'm doing the really deep breathing and the energy work, and I'm amplifying the energy and seeing healing. I'm teaching around the world Quantum touch, the power to heal, is in 17 languages, and it's gotten out there. I've been to Europe and Asia and the Middle East and all over the world teaching this work. We've had practitioners in 50 countries. So the thing is out there. Then we got shadow banned and lost our #1 Google ranking. And most people have never heard of us now because you know how the game is played. But anyway, so I'm happily going along teaching this, but I keep thinking, just like the Qigong experts that I was training, out of love and loyalty, they don't change the system. My master chopped wood and carried water for 10 years before they taught him a single technique. And we must preserve everything exactly as it was taught. But I've had people who had studied with the top Qigong masters in China tell me, why don't you get tired after 2 or 3 hours of running energy? So I'm not using my own energy. But my master, he can only go 15 or 20 minutes. Well, that's because he's using his energy. I don't do that. We just keep pulling in more energy all the time. So I had a breakthrough where a friend of mine said, I bet you can do that without touching me. I said, really? So I wanted to see if I could align his hips. And I knew how to do it. And the first time I tried it just worked instantly. And then one of my students informed me about the sphenoid bone. This is like a real piece of magic. It's a bone that dates back 880 million years ago into some lizardy creature. And it holds the pituitary. It's the first bone in the embryo. It distributes the pressure. It looks like a miniature version of the hips or a mask. It's about an inch behind the eyes and nose. And everybody's born with it out of alignment. And because it's out of alignment, when you measure a person's hips, now how do you do that? You come up the sides of the hips, you go up over the top, you press down, you feel where the bone stops, and then you get your eyes level and you say, oh, this side's high. It ain't rocket science. It's really easy to do if you have 2 minutes of training. So what I was able to do was meditate on the sphenoid bone, send energy to it, and when it aligns, the hips reflexively untwist in 1 second. And the cranial bones align. Now, chiropractors, physical therapists, osteopaths, they'll put a person on their side, they'll twist them, and then they'll apply pressure or force, and you hear crunch, 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 and then the person's back to where they were 4 days later. With this sphenoid alignment, which takes 1 second, or 3 or 4 if you take your time, it tends to last a lifetime. There's so many discoveries along the way, but let's give you a little overview. I was sitting in a coffee shop in Santa Monica, and I had played golf in the morning. And in my sweater, there was a golf tee. And I looked at the golf tee and I wondered, what if I meditate on this? This is such a dumb idea. What if I meditate on the golf tee as if it were a sphenoid bone? Okay, that's really dumb, but I tried it. And I said, okay, let me hand it to somebody. And I handed it to them, and it instantly untwisted their hips and cranial bones. I go, no, that can't be true. Let me try it again. I tried it 8 times in a row, and it worked every time. Then I tried the plastic lid on the coffee cup, and it worked. And then I found a pebble outside, and it worked. And then I better keep a journal. So I ran about 60 experiments. What happens if you boil water? What happens if you test the water that evaporated and so forth? And I came up with lawfulness of when it works and when it doesn't work. And in the process, discovered something I call conscious entanglement, where you can join objects in your mind and they'll all function as one regardless of distance. So that was some of the discoveries. Then I went to the University of Arizona, not as a student, and I got to meet with a room full of scientists. And they said, all right, what did you learn? How did you learn it? And I told them some of the story. And they said, okay, show us. So I taught them how to measure the hips. And then I found out so what I did was I had an object I'd meditated on, a pendant, a quantum touch pendant, actually. You can get them yourself if you like. And what I did was I tapped the person's shoulder and said, boing. And then I had to measure again. And we had 4 people measuring, 7 of the postdocs, And all these postdocs had their hips radically out of alignment. So it's really easy to measure them. You just put your hands on it and go, oh, hell, that's really out. And then a second later, like, well, it looks really even. Yeah. And so after we did have 4 people measuring, 7 different people, they threw up their hands and said, there's no doubt this is working. This unquestionably works. All right. 4 of them said they wanted to research and publish. They were really excited about it. They decided, oh man, this could really be something if we can study and publish this. And then the first one thought about it and said, but if I publish, I know I'll never get tenure at the university. And number 2, 3, 4 said, yeah, that would be academic suicide. And this is after they bragged about their MRIs and CT scans and special equipment. They were so excited to do the research. And then the head professor said he knew of no university anywhere in the world open to these discoveries. He compared the discoveries to Ignaz Semmelweis, Gregor Mendel, James Lind, William Harvey, Galileo, Giordano Bruno, and others who couldn't be appreciated in their lifetime. He said, you won't be recognized in this lifetime for these discoveries because it's outside the box, it breaks the paradigm, but good luck. And that was very nice. So I have since taken the discoveries so much further. And one final note before we just kind of chatting around, there's so many different topics to talk about. But I was teaching a workshop and we discovered that you can take your highest states of consciousness and directly transmit them so another person can start downloading them. And you don't experience them as thoughts, you experience them as emotions and body sensation. And you can start accessing other people's areas of freedom and joy. And there's hundreds of gifts that we have, and the way I discovered it was quite remarkable. I was sitting in one of my favorite cafes with my friend, and she told me, she said, I never had to study in college. I always got straight A's because I have a photographic memory and I just glanced at the book. I knew everything and I could just write the answers down. And so I had to study like crazy and I got a crappy memory and I barely got B's if I worked hard. And so I said, why don't you give me your memory? And she thought, how the hell do I do that? I said, I don't know, just take your memory, your photographic memory, and just give it to me. So she pretends she's doing some miming thing. She's giving me her photographic memory and puts it in my head. And I, of course, don't notice anything. We're just playing. And then as I'm going to bed that night, I thought about a friend. As I'm getting ready to go to sleep, I thought of a friend I hadn't seen in a long time. And the strangest thing, all of a sudden, there's his face right in front of me, clear as can be, with the name spelled in gold letters that was hanging in space, absolutely clear. Wow, that's amazing. And then I thought of a second friend. There she is, right in front of me with the name spelled in gold letters. And I'm thinking, I've never seen a visualization this clear in my life. So I'm reading the letters backwards or forwards, one at a time, and they're just don't move, like they're printed in space. And then a third friend, and I'm just delighted. And then all of a sudden my body was racked in fear. And I thought, why am I afraid? That was a fun experience, but I was afraid. So I had to get up for about 20, 30 minutes just to walk around and let the fear out of my body before I could go to sleep. So when I saw Carolyn a couple of days later, I said, when you think of friends, this is a question you're never going to ask anybody in your life. When you think of friends you hadn't seen in a long time, you suddenly see their face right in front of you with their name spelled in gold letters. Her jaw dropped. How did you know? She says, I'm like a machine. And then I said, do you carry a lot of fear? She said, oh, you have no idea. I said, I think I do have an idea. Anyway, I realized we can share the gifts with each other, but we can also share the subconscious garbage that comes along with the gift. So it took me years and years to figure out a concise method where we're just sharing the gift without the subconscious stuff. But I digress, because the reason I'm telling you the story is that I was teaching a retreat in Cancun about 2 years ago. And this was the subject, was sharing the gifts. And there were many people in the workshop that I hadn't seen in 10 or 15 years. And something stood out to me immediately, that these people had barely aged. The people who had been doing the work for decades and decades had slowed the aging process. So I had everyone say their age, and the whole room going, wow. And it was absolutely clear that the process of just using basic quantum touch for decades was slowing aging. So then we turned our attention to how can we amplify that? How can we turn that up tenfold? And we have. So I'm 77 now. But how do I know I'm really doing it? Well, for one thing, my arm had deep creases of sun damage 2 years ago. And when I held my arm upside down like this, I could see a lot of hanging flesh. And the hanging flesh is about 85% reduced. The sun damage is almost completely gone. Now, the elastin and the collagen have been rebuilding in the skin. The skin is getting thicker, not a whole lot, but enough. And the joke is that longevity takes a long time because the entropy of the system, like a train going downhill, you're deteriorating year after year. And you have to slow the entropy until the entropy stops. And then you got to build the syntropy or neg entropy. I like syntropy word better, and get the train to start going the other way, up the hill. And that takes work and that takes time. And so this is a process. So I just put out a new book recently called Energy Reverses Entropy, and it's how to slow, stop, and reverse aging. And it'll give you all the techniques. I don't hold anything back. All my books just tell you the whole story. I don't play secret games. Oh, you got to take the workshop to learn this. Now, it's better to take the workshop because you really you dive in, but no, I'm just going to give it all away. So the energy entropy book, we're seeing some phenomenal things. And I was posting on X a picture of this woman's hands before and after. And the comments I got was, that's Photoshop, or that's dehydration, or that's a different person's hands, or I got 8 different comments, and nobody wants to believe a photograph anymore. That's why I'm not even going to show them. But I am getting stronger and stronger on a regular basis. So a few days ago, I did 40 dips in a row, which is much stronger than I was in my 20s or 30s. Am I where I want to be yet? No, not even close. But I'm clearly making progress, reversing the aging process. So those are a few of the highlights of the last 50 years. But as you can imagine, it's just scratching the surface of what's possible.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you for sharing that little bit of insight into your own journey and what you have experienced. And I'm just at the very beginning. I'm reading some of the first books I think that you wrote and listening on Audibles. I'm becoming familiar with some of the things that you're sharing. And it's absolutely incredible that this hasn't actually gone more mainstream. As you said, there's a bit of hesitation on the academic side because it can't be weighed and measured. But considering that we are all energy and we're all energy beings, surprising that it hasn't become more mainstream.
Actually, it seems to me that mainstream is allergic to these kinds of discoveries because paradigms are built on structure. And the paradigm assumes that the only thing's real. See, the materialistic paradigm believes that everything is measurable, everything is physical. And once I can align somebody over a Zoom call by waving my finger and saying boing, it completely breaks the paradigm because there's no way a light touch on the hips or sending hard energy or putting consciousness in my finger to align a person in 1 second makes any sense to the material model. So what they do with anomalies is they run away. They just don't even look at them. And it's not that there's a lack of evidence. There's a lack of willingness to break the model because all the journals, all the scientists, they're all part of the club that says we won't rock the boat. And even when Rupert Sheldrake presented a TED Talk about 10 dogmas of science, they immediately shut it down as Rupert said, they eventually reposted it on what he called the naughty part of their site. But he was just asking questions. Well, did science make a promise they can't keep by assuming that everything will be explained with math and physics? Is the mind confined to the brain? Why do you assume it is? Can we question this? Can we ask? And so that's just unacceptable. Just even to ask the questions was unacceptable. I can prove the mind's not confined to the brain. And I did 3 Zoom calls about a year and a half, 2 years ago, where I had a doctor I'd never met, an audience I didn't know. And so the doctor's measuring each person's hips. And once he got the measurement, I had the person look in the camera. I meditated for a couple of seconds and I said, okay. And then he'd measure again. And 22 out of 22 people were aligned. It doesn't go anywhere when you post these things because they just get shut down, because the model doesn't want to be challenged. And that's the nature of any model. It wants to remain the model. And everybody has their careers, their reputation, their money, their fame to protect.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. I am glad we're sharing this now with our listeners because I feel this is something that anybody can use in their lives. And as you said, anyone can learn this. I remember you mentioning in something I watched that you found it difficult when you were talking about that, and this may have been some time ago, to actually use this on yourself. And how is this going now? Are you able to use this fairly successfully on yourself?
When I told the class, I was teaching a workshop maybe about 10 years ago. And I said, it's a little harder to work on yourself. And I got objections all over the room. I'm not the expert. Yeah, I've been at it for a long time, but I have my limited beliefs and I'm constantly learning. And I was wrong. And what I found is that for acute things, you can often work on yourself very easily. For chronic, there's often an emotional basis, and working on yourself may not break through the core issues that are behind it. And I also see that when you're working on yourself, it can be a longer term process, but you can do extraordinary things because I'm working on myself every single day with the aging process. And it's slow, but it's steady and it's profound. And people have no idea how important it is to align yourself with the future you want to be, emotionally and spiritually, and in taking action. And one piece of advice I would offer to people is make one solid change every week you're never going to go back on. For example, I never have to eat Oreos again. I can let them go for the rest of my life, and it's not going to cost me anything. And what would I eat that would be good for me compared to an Oreo? I could have something really amazing like papaya or strawberries with whipped cream on it. Oh, that would be even more satisfying. And I would not only feel good because I had made a choice to stop eating the Oreos, but I'd feel good about myself for having made a good choice. So if you make one small choice every week that you'll never go back on, it's very easy. It's that gradual change. It isn't the bunion suddenly reshaping itself in 1 minute. It's a gradual shift. Diet, emotion, lifestyle, I'm going to exercise more, whatever it is. You keep making these small choices. Now, if you make a 1% shift every week, in a couple of years, you're like a totally different trajectory. And you never have to feel like you're straining yourself. Also, trying to make a 30% or 50% change just screws up the microbiome. And then your whole body rebels and you're going, what the hell is this? It's so much better to make a turn rather than a right angle, because the turn you can handle, but a right angle is like sharp and disruptive. So I suggest be gentle with yourself. The process should feel like the end that you want to achieve. The means and the ends should feel aligned. I'm not going to struggle for well-being. I'm going to feel good to get to well-being because that's what well-being feels like. So you want to align yourself with the end results. Or another way of saying it is the process of getting there are the experiences of being there, or the steps of getting there are the experiences of being there.
That makes a lot of sense. And I feel where some of these good intentions go wrong is when we try to jump in too soon. And the interesting example that you gave about the bunion, I find it fascinating how we often are limited by our own beliefs or our own emotions that might still be stuck in there somewhere where it wouldn't be possible, but we are limiting ourselves to some degree. So how could our listeners maybe become aware of some of these things where they're self-limiting, and how can they work on that?
Everybody is limited because of one primary issue. Everybody's been wounded more than they want to acknowledge. That's the bottom line. I just finished a book. I'm looking to get a primary publisher because my old publisher is no more than a warehouse with a logo right now. But I wrote a book called A New Future. And it all the world's problems reduced to one issue. And it's true for the individual and it's true for society, is that we have a lot of wounded people who express their woundedness in positions of power. And that's all it is. And then there's the big fix, which is another whole story. The bottom line is our pain goes deeper than we want to know, but our love goes deeper than we can know. Meaning that the emotions we feel are the limiting factor. I should say it differently. The emotions we don't want to feel are the limiting factor. So the mantra, if you have to have one, is don't hold back. It doesn't mean to act crazy in the grocery store and start screaming, but it means when you're in the privacy of your home and you need to scream, great. You can make fists, lean forward, open your mouth as wide as you can, and silently, you don't have to scare the neighbors. You can completely lose it. And what's interesting about a silent scream is you notice your thoughts completely stop. There's no thinking. It's just a scream. And it's a reset. And whether you do it for a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and the intent is to spend the contracted energy that you have in your body. And so the emotional vulnerability that people are unwilling to access within themselves is really the issue, because it's the contraction of the energy that creates the dysfunction. And it's not like you need to do anything. You need to stop having the contraction. So it's not like you got to fix something. You got to release the part that was broken, because you're not broken on the deepest parts of you. You're totally well. It's just you're carrying all the brokenness around, like you're dragging a bunch of old suitcases and furniture around with chairs on your arms and dragging suitcases behind you and thinking, gee, what supplement should I take? And it's not about that. Not that you shouldn't take supplements. It's just that you need to let go of all that extra stuff you're carrying around. And then you realize you were full within yourself.
I like that analogy, that picture that you're painting. I think that's easy for our listeners to follow that and imagine that in their own lives. And how that happens, we carry around so much baggage, actually, and then ask, what can we do? It's so true. And thank you for sharing that. I find that's very helpful to think about it that way. Yeah.
It's really funny when you think about how excited and enthusiastic a 4-year-old is. And they can't wait to get outside and run and explore and open the package or to see the puppy or whatever it is. It's just like exuberance. And then you see the average 40-year-old or 60-year-old. And it's like, you just look at the enthusiasm, just dropping year by year. What is that? It is trauma that's not been processed, because you can feel the intensity and the joy without the baggage. And as you let go of the baggage, the vibrance becomes brighter and brighter. I remember living in Mexico when I was 24. There was a 76-year-old woman who was just hysterically funny, and she was so lit up and bright. There's not that much trauma. She's still living in the same town where she was born, and she was just laughing at everything and just sparking, and so much fun and exuberance and joy within her. And then I compare it to, she kept saying, oh, we don't have any money. It doesn't, but she's richer than anybody I knew in the United States. She had so much love around her and people, and she wasn't hungry. Everything was good. She just didn't have a lot of money. And I say, what's the trade-off? What's the trade-off where people give up their spark in exchange for stuff? It's really a bad trade.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're mentioning that, I think about a lot of the people that surround me and that I know, and it's true. I think of my little nieces and nephews, and they're so excited about things. Then as life progresses, that kind of gets dampened by all the things that happen. So yeah, to find that way back to maybe unclutter and almost like an onion, peel back some of the things that have happened and find that again. And how can we, I want to say in the beginning when you mentioned that people who are working with the quantum touch, they raise their frequency and then they bring people to that frequency. So how can we raise our frequency and stay in that for as long as we can? Because things happen in life and bring us down. So how can we do that?
We have a course we used to call Self-Created Health that took me 30 years to develop. And I think it's now level 3. I haven't really looked at the pattern of it, but what it is, I woke up one morning with severe flu symptoms. I had a gurgling chest cough, high fever, sore throat, congested, bones aching, as bad as I could feel. And I thought, maybe I'll just get some hot lemon water and just be sick for a week. But I had just attended a seminar by a spiritual teacher I was working with that said that all conditions are functions of suppressed anger. And I thought, okay, let me try this out. So I wrapped myself in my blanket, sat in my meditation spot, and I thought, what am I angry about? What I noticed was I was emotionally numb and I didn't have any access to any emotion at all. And I thought about my childhood. I thought about this and that, and nothing was moving me emotionally at all. And then after about 8 minutes of looking, I suddenly remembered that 3 days ago, somebody had said something that was intentionally meant to make me feel humiliated in front of my friends. And it worked. And I pretended nothing had happened so it would go away faster. And so all of a sudden, my emotions came flooding through my body. And I just decided, well, just feel it. Nothing special, no technique. Just feel it. So I felt it, and I could feel tears and rage and just whatever coming up. There was no particular pattern to it, just don't hold back. So I did. And so I got up and I took a shower afterwards and didn't think about it, but I got in my car and I drove down to my favorite coffee shop, sat in the sun, drinking my coffee, and I'm looking at the coffee cup and it's half empty. And it suddenly dawned on me, oh my God, I was sick this morning. It took me a full 30 years to figure out a complete system that we call self-created health. And the system has 7 steps to it. The first step is find out exactly what the emotional cause is. And that's pretty easy to figure out because everything about the symptom tells you everything about the emotional cause when you learn how to decipher it. And so that's the first part of the class. And usually within the first hour, everybody knows their emotional causes. That's easy. The other 6 steps take longer. The release steps, how do you release the hurt, anger, shame, and guilt, which hold the fear in place. So when you've released those core elements, then, and you've done the work with the inner child and the inner adolescent to make their life better in the past, and you've gone through the self-forgiveness process, that takes you through the first 7 steps. And on the other side of it, what happens is not only do the symptoms disappear, but people feel grateful they had the condition because it showed them how they had stopped loving. Like a woman in the first workshop I was teaching, she said, "Oh, I got to forgive my father. And I always had this love for him and I couldn't." And she went off 8 or 10 minutes about how she loved her dad. I said, "What was the condition?" She said, "Oh, my shoulder hurt." And so, yeah, it's a shoulder pain she'd been carrying around for 25 years. But okay, by the way, that disappeared. But that wasn't even interesting. The interesting thing was that she got all the love back for her dad, and she was grateful for having had the shoulder pain all those years because it reminded her of what was missing. And that's, I think, the level 3 quantum touch course. We got like a whole series of them to take people further and further along.
Wow. I feel that there's just so much wisdom in this. And to share this with our listeners, I feel this applies to anyone. We all have a body. We're all aging. These are things that are happening every day. We're all energy. So this applies to all of us, what you've been discovering over the last 40, 50 years. This applies to all of us. And thank you for sharing that and writing the books and getting the information out there.
Yeah, it's core information that everybody wants to know. They just don't know that they want to know it. But the basic skill of moving the energy is so simple. Now, I talk too much about moving bones. And the reason I do that isn't because bones are interesting. They represent less than 1% of what the work is about, because most of it's about working on the condition that you have, bringing down the pain, the inflammation, the suffering, and all that kind of stuff. But I like it because I'm demonstrating the impossible. And it's a paradigm shift. And you can see it in a couple seconds. And it's visible. So that's why I lean on it. But the bottom line is that we have these abilities that break the old models of reality, that allow us a higher level of freedom and responsibility, allows us to really explore our spiritual and human evolution and to go and become more than we had ever imagined.
Yeah, so in a sense, this is also about our human potential, to really lean into that and discover that. Yeah, this is fascinating. Now, you talk about in the book and some of the videos I've seen about running energy. And how can our listeners imagine that when you say that we're running energy?
I'm beginning to question my own terminology and my own assumptions. And I'd like to do this as often as possible. But let's just start with an experience. And the experience is this. If you put your attention on your finger, right now, do this yourself, and put all your awareness into your finger and see if you can feel how the skin wraps around your finger. See if you can feel every part of the finger. And now see if you can feel the blood going through your finger. Feel the pulsing inside. Can you feel the tendons inside the finger? Maybe the bones. Can you feel how the fingernail attaches to the finger? Underneath the fingernail. Now imagine you have a little feather and you're stroking your finger with the feather and you feel where the feather is touching you. Now, is the finger tingling, vibrating, buzzing? Yeah. Now that buzzing, tingling is our physiological expression of the life force energy. Yeah. Yes. And so what happens is, unlike Reiki, we're not waiting for energy. We're bringing it. And we're doing it almost like a martial art, except we're not going to hurt anybody. But what you're going to do is you're going to learn to move it through your entire body in powerful waves. And then you're going to learn to link it to breathing patterns, deeper breathing patterns. And then you're amplifying the energy, which, the prana, as the Vedics had taught 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. And the energy works with an intelligence. And you don't have to understand the physiology. In fact, we've often used something we call the where does it hurt technique. It's a very complicated technique where you sandwich the spot that hurts. Where does it hurt? My shoulder. Okay, let me hold the shoulder. And then you bring the energy up and through and you feel it vibrating in your hands. And you can, and as if it's an acute condition, your hands will start vibrating immediately. If it's a very chronic condition, it may take you 5 minutes, maybe more, before your hands start to feel that vibration happening. But because you keep raising your energy, you never match their vibration. You never pick up their stuff. You never get drained or tired. You can keep going for hours. So there's something about duration that matters, because you have to understand the entire system is based upon resonance and entrainment. When two things are vibrating at different frequencies, either the lower one matches, the high matches the low, or they meet in the middle. With quantum touch, we keep raising the energy higher and higher and higher throughout the session, and the other person has to slowly or quickly come up to match us, because we're not going to come down and match them. We're going to keep bringing our energy up higher and higher. I showed Dr. Norm Shealy, the founding president of the American Holistic Medical Association, this. He said to me after I worked on his nurses and his staff, he said, yeah, everybody got better immediately. I think some of those people might have liked you. I think some of them might have been open to you a little bit. He said, I want to see how this works on people with 20 and 30 years of constant pain who have never been helped by any traditional or alternative therapy. Because I don't have to do a double blind. I just have to make the test so rigorous, I can't believe anything but the result. So he brought in these chronic pain patients who had 20, 30 years of constant pain. And I taught his whole staff to do the healing sessions. And everyone had between, like in a 1 hour session, between a 30 and 70% reduction of their pain from a single session. He wrote to me 10 days later and said, it's still lasting. And he wrote the foreword to my Quantum Touch book and called it the first technique that may truly allow us all to become healers. And so that was a real boost to be able to get that kind of an endorsement on the work, which should have taken it much further, but it's what it is.
Yeah, slow steps. But I feel like this is spreading. And I spoke to some people as well in my circles, and some of them are practitioners and a lot of them have heard of it. So I do feel that the word is getting out there and people are becoming more aware. And especially, I think for chronic conditions, there often isn't an answer that we get even over decades. So this is a great way to start working with our own bodies, right? And helping ourselves with that.
Chronic condition means there's a chronic emotion. And you can work with a functional medicine doctor who will help the physiology balance itself. You can work with self-created health to release the core emotions that are locking it up. And you can work with quantum touch to raise the energy to allow the self-healing mechanisms to work further and faster. I remember in one of my classes, this guy, he came up with a new word for quantum touch. He called it a pain in the ass. And the reason was he was paraplegic. And before quantum touch, he couldn't feel the bed sores on his butt. But after quantum touch and the healing, he could feel his own bed sores. That was the most original name we've had for the work in all these years. But it was apropos.
Oh, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Wow, I feel like we've learned so much in this time that we've spent together. And I want to thank you for being here today and sharing this with all of us and sharing this with our listeners. And hopefully we're doing our little part to spread the word.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. If people want to get started, they can go to quantumtouch.com and check out the program, get some free stuff. And then you can start taking the workshops if you like. You can read the books. The new book, Energy Reverses Entropy, is out there. I have another new book that is out there called The Lazarus Material, Lazaris. And I was carrying around 2,600 pages of notes for 45 years on the best spiritual metaphysical knowledge I've ever come across by a factor of 10 compared to anything else I've ever found. So I put it into 50 chapters, which was incomplete, but it's a pretty good start. And if you buy a 50-sided die, the book's like $9.99 on Kindle, but you buy a 50-sided die for another $9, and it'll give you a number, and you can read that chapter. It's like an oracle, and the book is not meant to be read straight through. You can if you like, but it's so rich that if you keep rolling that number, you're going to read that chapter over and over again. You go, okay, maybe I better listen to this. But it's more than you can take in a lifetime in that book. So that's a new one that's out there. But the Quantum Touch The Power to Heal book is a really good beginning place for people. And there's so many instructors around the world. And so if you're wanting to learn this stuff, it's totally available.
Amazing. And we, of course, will be linking to all of Richard's resources in the show notes as well. So if you're curious about finding out more, or you want to take some of the workshops and actually start practicing this work as well, there are lots of little pieces to get started with. And the books, I find the books are an amazing resource as well. Like I said, I'm just making my way through the first one. So there's ample material for everyone to dive in and bring this into their own lives and start exploring and start discovering in their own way. Thank you, Richard, for being here today. And thank you for sharing all this wisdom that I feel you have gathered over a lifetime and you have put into books and courses and programs. And thank you for sharing a little bit of that today with us and with our listeners. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel so much gratitude. I can't even really express it. Because I feel this was a long time coming and a really important thing for our listeners to hear and to tune into. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that, and keep up the work you're doing. We want to know more. We want to read more books and definitely also learn more about quantum touch.
Got a lot more ready to publish right now. That I've got 4 new books ready to go.
Wow. Yeah.
And I haven't even talked about them yet. They're just like, oh my God.
I look forward to reading more. And you're looking for a publisher for those, or those are coming?
I need to find a major publisher. I'm tired with the self-publishing stuff. I need to find somebody, because these are going to be landmark books that would change the future forever.
So if anybody's listening in and they know somebody and there's a connection there, please reach out to Richard and see if we can make those books happen. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening in today, for listening into this really, I feel like you said, it is actually all of what you've done already is landmark information. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and take care of yourselves and be well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejōrni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.